Hello and welcome to another episode of Peace at Last, the podcast that discusses the latest scientific discoveries in psychology, explains techniques and principles from ancient spiritual traditions, and gives you the mental technology to put them into practice. You can change the way you feel and find peace at last. My name is Fabrice Nye, psychologist, coach, and spiritual explorer. If this podcast speaks to you, you may subscribe on the platform of your choice. I also invite you to share your favorite episode with some of your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the word and support the podcast. I am starting today a series that I have wanted to do for a long time. I'm going to talk about 3 short, one-syllable words that we use all the time, but that have the potential to create misery, anxiety, and depression. But before we do this, I'd like to thank a listener who signs in as Emmet for you for leaving an iTunes review. He writes, "Amazing. I was looking forward to this a long time when I heard about it on the David Burns podcast that Fabrice Nye used to host, and I highly suggest you listen to the podcasts he hosted there, all the first ones until recently, when he switched to this project." Then Emmet for you adds that he just wished that the upload schedule was more consistent. Well, thank you for this review. I appreciate your vote of confidence so very much. Knowing that you've missed the podcast while I was sorting myself out makes me aware that the content I present here is meaningful to you, and that makes me want to keep publishing it. But to return to our topic for today, one of the words that give us the most trouble in the English language is the word should. You might recognize here one of the thinking traps we talked about in episode 6, the should statement. We'll talk in a moment about why this is a distortion. Let's look first at what is a should. According to the online etymology dictionary, should is the past tense of the auxiliary shall, which comes from the Old English and the Germanic languages, and that carries the meanings of owing or to be under an obligation, also of guilt or debt. It conjugated in the past tense as scolde. Because of that, Dr. Burns liked to say that using the word should was like scolding yourself. This is not very positive. No wonder that it leads to negative affect. German psychoanalyst Karen Horney referred to the tyranny of the should. She believed that our psyche was split between an idealized self and a real self. Quoting Karen Horney, she described that kind of thinking like this: "You should be able to endure everything, to understand everything, to like everybody, to be always productive, to mention only a few of these inner dictates." We feel like we are unable to live up to that idealized self and that we are flawed in comparison to how we should be. Of course, we are imperfect beings living in an imperfect world, or at least according to our definition of perfection. Despising our true self in favor of an unattainable ideal self is hopeless. Albert Ellis, when he wrote about the musts, believed that they were the source of low frustration tolerance, self-pity, depression, discomfort, and anxiety. He said that there were 3 major types of musts. Number 1, I must do well. That means that I must also win the approval of others, or else I am no good. Number 2, you must treat me well. That means that you also have to do the right thing, or else you are no good and deserve to be punished. And number 3, life must be easy. That means without problems, discomfort, or inconvenience. Each should statement contains some implicit judgment and criticism. When I say to myself, she should listen to me, I am implying that there's something wrong with her when she doesn't. The same goes for the shoulds that I administer to myself. When I say I should have known better, I should be more productive, I should exercise more, etc., I am saying to myself that what I'm doing isn't good enough, and therefore that I am not good enough. It's like getting poisoned with arsenic 1 milligram at a time. After a while, we wonder why we are living in a toxic mental environment. Are you beginning to see how those shoulds are unrealistic? Do you see how they are bound to create misery? Do you see how each one of them is like a microaggression on your own well-being? But I want to go one step further. I have already alluded to this in episode 6. It may sound perfectly reasonable to hold that people should not lie, steal, or cheat. As a matter of fact, this is part of the West Point Cadets Honor Code. We will not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate among us anyone who does. It's all well and good to resolve to follow that code for oneself, but to hold that the rest of the world is supposed to is a fantasy. Is it true that on this planet people should not lie, steal, or cheat? Well, do they? That seems to be the reality of it. And even when it applies to oneself, because we are imperfect beings, there will be times when we are unable to stick to such an honor code. Notice that this kind of code, this kind of should, is a value statement. And values are personal, changeable, and they're context dependent. You probably don't hold the same set of values as your neighbor, and maybe not even your life partner or your closest friend. If that's true, what gives us the authority to declare things ought to be one way or the other? But I want to go one step further again. I would like to advocate that the word should be removed altogether. Scrap it out of your vocabulary. Instead, I propose that we simply recognize what is happening. If you look at the evidence, you may recognize that what is happening is what should be happening. As Byron Katie would say, how do I know this is what should be? Because that's what is. If you look at your own actions, you may regret something you did or said and thinking to yourself that you should have acted differently. But imagine for a moment that we possess a time machine that has the capability to bring every particle in the universe back to its original state, position, and speed as when you committed the act, and we let events unfold again. Do you think that you would act differently? Remember that you would have the exact same set of information, the very same emotions, and more importantly, you would have the same beliefs. Since you have no choice but act in a manner congruent with your beliefs, you are bound to do the same thing. This is why beating yourself up and lamenting on how you should have acted differently, or judging and blaming someone else for having done something that you think they shouldn't have done, is pointless. The rational and healthy approach instead is to look at what did happen and at what is, and learn the lessons from it. Decide whether you would rather it didn't happen again and choose a better course of action to apply next time. And that's yet another issue with believing should statements. When they are applied to other people or to the world, they absolve us of our responsibility. If I get hung up on my spouse should listen to me, I get blinded to the fact that in that same instant when I'm judging them, I am the one not listening. And that severely curtails my ability to make a change in the relationship. If I think that the world should change in order to accommodate me, I put myself in the position of victim, and I declare my own powerlessness. So if the word should is detrimental to your peace of mind, and if it is not even accurate, how are we to handle it? Well, I have a few strategies to offer to you. Number one is rephrasing. That's also called the semantic technique. If the word should is not meaningful, first remove it from your vocabulary, especially your internal vocabulary, how you speak to yourself. You may ask, how do you convey a rule like the West Point Honor Code mentioned before, or even a law? Well, you will notice that the Honor Code did not use the word should. They start their statement of resolve with the words, I will. This conveys a strong intention, a commitment rather than a scolding. Similarly, in codes of law, the words shall and may are being used. They state what is and isn't allowed. In a separate document, specific sanctions are listed that indicate what will happen to those who violate the code, knowing full well that a law without enforcement has no teeth. But there's no should. There's no point either in using the word should when it comes to events following the laws of nature rather than human laws. In those cases, you simply state what does happen. As in Newton's first law, an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion. The most straightforward replacement for should is the word is. And how about the sermons that you deliver to yourself? I should have paid my taxes before the deadline. That becomes, it would have been more sensible to pay my taxes before the deadline. I should lose 20 pounds becomes, I would feel healthier if I weighed 20 pounds less. And I shouldn't go to bed so late becomes, I would prefer it if I went to bed earlier because I would feel fresh in the morning. This way, shoulds simply become preferences based on facts. It becomes clear that we are free agent and we're making choices based on the outcome we prefer. A second strategy is called reattribution. When we use a should referring to the past or the present, we deny the infinite number of factors that led to a particular circumstance, to a particular action, or to a particular choice, whether it applies to yourself, to others, or to the world. Reattribution is recognizing that we cannot grasp everything that contributes to a particular problem. Ask yourself questions like, what did I do that contributed to this? What other factors may have played a role? Can I really know that things could have been different? What did I learn that can help improve future circumstances? Finally, a third strategy is called positive reframing. Consider your beliefs that start with I should, he should, she should, they should. How are those beliefs serving you? Do they help motivate you? Do they help you make sure that someone doesn't cause you any harm? Do they help you maintain your own standards? Do they make a statement about your values? What do they show about you that is beautiful and positive? Do they show that you stand up for yourself? Positive reframing is a form of acceptance that recognizes that such beliefs, even if they contain distortions and thinking traps, are there for a reason, and that they emanate from a very positive place in you. So, to summarize, you have 3 strategies available to you when you find yourself shoulding all over the place. One is rephrasing, where you replace should with is, or does, or I would prefer it if. 2, reattribution, where you consider the alternative causes of events and behaviors. And 3, positive reframing, where you acknowledge to yourself that should statements come out of a very good place in you, and that they reflect positive attributes and values, and that there's a helpful side to holding those beliefs. So, let go of your shoulds if you so choose, and let me know how it changes your life. We'll be back next time with another of those little words that can mess up your life. This concludes this episode of Peace at Last. For more information, go to peaceatlast.us, where you'll find the show notes for this episode. If you have comments or questions, leave them on the website, or you can email me directly at fabrice@life.net. I may be selecting your question as a topic for a future episode. I also invite you to contact me if you'd like some personalized help in applying the principles I describe here. If you just discovered this podcast, I'm inviting you to subscribe on iTunes or on the platform of your choice. If you like it and you want to support it, tell a friend who may not be familiar with podcasting and show them how to subscribe. And I also invite you to go to iTunes and leave a review. It will help other people discover this podcast. I am Dr. Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join me next time for another episode of Peace